And I think every project is a leap of faith, but what was it about this one that gave you the confidence to take that jump?
I grew up in London, but I knew who Ted Kaczynski was. And I kind of thought, oh yeah, I know all about who Ted Kaczynski is. And then I started getting into it, and I had no idea. And, I was really looking for something that felt so far away from me, because I felt like it's been a long time since I've been able to sort of flex any muscles in kind of what my job is, in sort of developing characters and stuff, and it felt so far away from me. I got really excited by the notion. There were a couple of episodes to read that I was not in. They were the first two, and there was just a voiceover, but I thought the voiceover was very powerful. I thought the writing was strong, and Greg Yaitanes taught a really good fight, and so yeah, it was really it was a leap of faith. It's peculiar. I found it really peculiar because so often with television, you're not able to look at the whole object. With film, there are 3 acts. You can look at the whole thing, you know what it is, and you can sign off. And so it is a leap of faith. And but it was an amazing. I had an amazing journey on this. I really loved it. Initially, it was kind of frightening, the speed at which people shoot television. Who knew? My rhythm is I go home and I start cooking and I think about what I did during the day, and you're like, oh yeah, I went from this job to where we were shooting on a really easy day, we were shooting 8 to 10 pages a day, to go and shoot Avengers, and we had 3 pages to do in 2 weeks. So the speed of that, I couldn't begin. I'm trying to cook and remember. I couldn't even remember the beginning of the day, but it was really exhilarating. I loved it.
And it was a very collaborative process. I talked with Greg, and he was saying, there were days when you guys would get to the cabin an hour or 2 ahead, and you'd be able to talk about how to express things.
Yeah,
in an episode, which must be freeing.
He was really respectful in that way, and I was like wowed by it. With a schedule like that he and I would go to that cabin and literally lie down on the floor and talk about the day's work and storyboard. I mean, a lot of this episode would be him and I coming in without a crew, lying down on the floor and figuring out shots together that would express segues between the different time frames, him looking at each other, and it takes a really confident director to invite you into that process. Not that he didn't have his own fucking plan, by the way, he had a really great, but that he was confident enough to sort of invite you into that, and also aware enough that 2 hours just alone, not shooting, taking 2 hours out your shooting day when you're trying to shoot that many pages is a lot. And he was aware that it was a really good use of his time. It was, I loved him and I loved it and loved everything about it.
Some of the things he mentioned that you guys had sort of came up with on the day were just that montage. I love the end montage where the different versions of Ted end up looking at each other. And that was something I think that you guys just sort of created that day. The idea of how do you express that Kaczynski, for him, building bombs is an addiction. Yeah. And those are things, too, that came to you guys on sort of the day, how to just show that.
Yeah, that was, I know about addiction, so I thought, there must be something. It must be hard to not do something that you're really good at, and why don't we treat it like a drug and express the sense of calm that he gets from this kind of monastic work that he's doing, and and have a new. I mean, the fact that they have a standalone. There shouldn't be a standalone Ted episode in this show. It should be dogged CIA agent hunts monster, And the fact that they decided to have that means there's a more nuanced, you know, they don't want to have a more nuanced look at this story, and that's great, because we all know the monstrous bit, you know. If there's nothing more to say, that I don't have a job. You know what I mean? So yeah. So that was it was an amazing experience.
And just to go, I know a lot of people are probably curious about the research that you did.
Yeah.
You did a lot of it. You had access to the FBI's list of the novels that were in his cabin.
Yeah, that was the best thing. There were a bunch of stuff. I mean, there are his diaries that they have. There's this unpublished autobiography that he wrote, and I read those, and there are so many details that are so rich, and some that are just so fucking odd and not useful. And then there was his reading. They had a list. The FBI had a list of every novel that was found in his cabin, and we all of us love stories. That's what I love. So I found that really accessible, and none of them were surprising. They were all the outsider novels. They were all Crime and Punishment and The Stranger, and I mean they were all about a man alone and apart from society, and so I started working through his reading list, and in a sort of attempt to get into his head, and it was so useful. I want to be able to do that on other projects. Is what were they reading? What was this man doing? For 24 hours a day in a 10-by-8 cabin for 19 years, besides building bombs, and it was fascinating, really, really useful.
And I've also seen you say that you...
I was probably lying.
No, you watched documentaries, that you heard stories from Ted's family, and those are things that you didn't find that useful to you in creating your own version, because they were their versions of Ted, not the one you wanted to tell Ted's version of Ted.
Yeah, absolutely, and including, by the way, including that, I'm left. Whatever you think you're doing, whatever you would like to pretend that you're doing your version of Ted, right? I mean, it's your version, and so I can read his diaries, and diaries aren't just personal. They're one day going to be read, and so he's presenting himself in a certain way, although there are moments of such brutal honesty and clarity, and really, I mean, I don't know if you all know this, I don't know if you care to know it, and maybe I'm going to be polluting your minds for the rest of your life. But Ted could self-fillet, and this was very important to him. We didn't include that in the. I guess it's those long winter evenings, just.
Andrew, who wrote it, told me there were other things. Pause for laughter for self-filation. Yeah. There we go. That there were.
I didn't attempt it.
Not part of the research.
My yoga days are over.
But one of the other things he said that was revealed in the journals, or the unpublished autobiography, is that he did ask himself, why would I keep going back for this testing for 3 years? And in his writing, he said it was because he was promised that there would be a party with girls at the end. And Andrew said they thought they couldn't actually put that in the show because people would be like, your reaction's like, there's no way that was real. But that goes to show just how lonely he is, and that kind of thing then informs the rest of the stuff that we do see, I think, in the show, and that idea of just that complete lack of connection with anyone. But he would put up for 3 years of torture for a chance to meet a girl.
Yeah, and he made attempts. he wrote some really suspicious things in Lonely Hearts columns, asking for. It was like caveman seeks squaw, rather un-PC. But we're talking about a serial bomber, so I suppose that's the last of her. Anyway, and then he would get responses, and one of the responses was like, "I'm lying in the grass thinking about you right now and touching myself," and he writes in his diary like, "Oh God, what a weirdo," whatever he writes about her, and I was thinking, that sounded like a promising, lead actually there, Ted. She's lying in the grass anyway. But and not to make light of it, but I guess what I'm trying to get to in all of this is that loneliness, that crushing loneliness and alienation that he felt is in my opinion, not absolutely. I absolutely believe is the driving force behind the horror that he perpetrated on Americans. And it is that ideology was something that he sort of constructed to forgive himself this just fury at the world. But I also think this is it's an interesting and peculiarly American horror story. I mean, I think horror is all about the monsters getting inside the walls, right? So, and one of the greatest horror movies is Alien, and what's great about it is the ship that keeps you safe from outer space, the monster gets inside the walls of the ship, and then actually the monster gets inside the body. Now, the contract that you make with the government, the town, is I'll leave my sword at the town gates and you'll deal with the monsters, right? And in that circumstance, it's the corporation wants the thing in your body, actually in your body, to bring it home. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant construction. And in this, as we see, so often, the administration blames the last administration for letting monsters inside the walls, and it's all fucking terrible. And in this circumstance, they raised a monster. His code name when he joined that project, MK Ultra, was lawful, and they weaponized this rather sensitive, brilliant child, and that to me is like horrifying. That it's true. It's real horror. The monster doesn't need to get in the wards. You made him, and the people that made him are the very people whose job it is to keep you safe. I mean, it's a fascinating and kind of perfect narrative, but. Again, having read everything that I read, and it is just my opinion, therefore it's unassailable, is that he was really driven by loneliness and my God, was he fucking lonely.
Another decision that I've heard you say that you made was in the final episode of the series, we see Ted in a courtroom, and he's hearing statements from the victims. And I think you said you started to read that script, and then you decided, wait, I don't want to read this now. I want to react on camera for the first time, processing this, which I think is a brilliant choice.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
No, it's absolutely a choice born out of fear more than that. Oh my God! And I was in the makeup truck, and they were filming one of the bomb victims, and they were getting the prosthetics ready, and I had to walk out the truck. I just was it made me so anxious and uncomfortable, and I wanted him to be sort of hit with the same sort of sense of remorse. He expresses remorse in his diaries, actually, which is peculiar. And then he sort of argues his way through it that we're at war, and there's always collateral damage in war, and etc. But I really threw me seeing that, and then I was thinking, actually, I don't want to read this last part of the episode in which I am listening to Ted is listening to the victims come forward, and not to hear it until it's time to shoot my stuff. And it worked, but it was born out of fear of me getting kind of bored and then starting to act or something awful like that.
Have you done that on other projects as well?
Nope.
No. really? You haven't? Like, that was the first
I
one?
mean, I have a method that I use, that I fall back on if my imagination isn't working and stuff, and so I'm often using that method. But you know, new things come to me, and trying to sort of just try new things. I mean, you know, like I really isolated myself on this show when I lived in a cabin. It's really funny. It's really funny because I said, I want to go. I don't want to live in the hotel. I don't want to be, you know, in town. I want to be in a cabin. And they started sending me pictures of like these cabins without electricity on the edge of lakes. And I was like, no. I want a really chic cabin with like a pool or something. I just want to be on my own. I mean, you know, like, I think you've misunderstood. But it was really useful to be out in nature, in the countryside, on your own, not being in the bar with the actors at the end of the night, and it was really, I found it really useful and rather pretentious.
I think we had talked about this episode before, and you had said the longest you went was 3 days without really talking to anyone. You go into work on Monday morning, and your voice actually cracked because you hadn't spoken to anyone, which is amazing.
Well, that's true, because but it's everything, you know. And I have 3 children and a wife and a dog and a cat, and they all need to be taught to and tucked in. And but this weekend I asked if I could have, you know, no contact, which is in this day and age, and I mean no Twitter, no Instagram, no Facebook, no texting, nothing, no news, no TV, no. And it is spending that much time, honestly, alone, is extraordinary. And the amount of time in the day, by the way, but no wonder he could sell for late when you think about it. I mean, but the amount of time suddenly in your day to really think about things and yourself and your place in the world and what you know. I mean, it was, and I came to work and got asked a question by the driver in the car, and I went to speak, and I went, I'd forgotten how to speak. 3 days I lost it.
3 days. It just took 3 days, right? And I also, you know, Andrew told me that you would go into the cabin between takes as well. And then he was saying that the beautiful montage at the end, whenever we see Ted imagining what life could have been with, you know, the little toddler, he was saying that he was surprised how emotional it was to watch you that day after having seen you in that cabin alone for so long, to then introduce that child really was a very moving experience. What was that like for you as the actor, sort of then playing that beautiful moment? But
I was just trying to get the kid not to look at the camera, to be honest with you. I was trying to engage him so he wouldn't stare down the and just be really engaged with him. I mean, I loved that sequence. Actually, one of the hardest things was at the party that they put the show on here. I think the really important thing that the film, I'd like to say, that the TV show is trying to, it is asking for your empathy. It is not asking for your sympathy for Ted. And I think that it's to practice that kind of empathy, I think, is important. To actually go, look, he did hideous things, and there is no escaping that. But to wonder about why, I think, is important and is edifying. But so we're at the premiere or whatever the thing is, and there's a party downstairs, and I go downstairs, and they've brought his cabin, and that we had rebuilt, and it's exactly the same. The set designers did an incredible job, and it has all of his books in it, and his guns. I mean, everything lovingly recreated, and just piles of people going in and out and taking selfies of themselves, which is like the very anathema of what you know. It's the. I was like, wow, and I went in and I downed a rather large scotch and closed the door and shut everybody. There's this huge party going on with music outside Ted's windows, and I didn't know what I thought this was it was such an awful moment. And so what I did was I stole the first edition copy of Arthur Koestler's Darkness at Noon and put it in my pocket and walked out. That's what I did. But it, it felt really horrible to see that. But
this episode, I think, is obviously wonderful because of your performance, but then also the younger actors playing Ted. And one of the things I also heard was that you were not asked to do this, but you did it on your own. You recorded your voice for them so they could kind of hear the cadence of adult Ted. And Greg had said that he thought that was something perhaps that occurred to you because you've directed before, and that's something a director thinks of the greater good. And so he said he didn't ask where it's something that you did, and he was so grateful for it. So how did that come about?
That's really sweet of him. It wasn't me. It was my dialect coach asked me to do the brilliant Tim Monach, who wanted to do it for the kids. I'm so not that selfless. And was slightly irritated at how good they were actually in the show. So. If I could have put some more obstacles in the way that they tripped up over, I would have, but damn it, they really did a good job. No, they were so fantastic, it was very irritating. Little fuckers.
The truth is coming out here, I love it. You go from a role like this to something like The Vision, to, we know that you just wrapped work on the Han Solo film, with Ron Howard, tweeting that photo of you wrapping up. I mean, how do you just go from something as stripped down as this to then those big productions where you still have red under your nails from The Vision?
Right now, because I was there yesterday. Film sets are sort of the same all over. I love them, and they are they're they're a bunch of people filling in a crossword together. And I love that. I love that collaboration. And after this, I'm going to go and to see. There's a BAFTA screening of this movie that I made called Journey's End. It's a little $5 million movie about the First World War. The director did an amazing job, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. It's got Sam Claflin in, and I'm gonna really. My experience on film sets is one of camaraderie, and I love that. I was a bit worried about this because I sort of don't interact with people that often, but then the camaraderie that I felt with Greg and Zach, the DP, and the crew at large was wonderful. But time is the main difference between all of these. The frills. The trailer's a little less comfy, but I truly don't really give a shit about that stuff. So they are very similar, except the time. But then I love that feeling of I love that feeling like on Journey's End, going, well, we haven't got the money to do that. We could do. We haven't got the money to do that. Yeah, and you figure out something. You sometimes get to something much more imaginative because you are trying to, think your way around a problem. And another reason I've decided that I'm actively looking. It was, my first experience. The TV that I did was in London with Peter. We did a 3-part show, so I could still look at the whole object, and it was a story in 3 acts, really, But doing episodic television has been a revelation for me because it's a very different way of telling stories, and I loved it, and I loved the sort of the focus that you can have on character and getting lost in that. If this had been a 90-minute show, it absolutely would have been CIA agent chasing a monster. There wouldn't have been time, and it wouldn't have been appropriate, and it would have been a thriller, right? And you can't really have a thriller on television. You have drama, and I love drama, and there's less and less of them in movies, because it's flipped, right? It used to be that television had to work for everybody, and that film could work for niche audiences. And now if you're making a film, it's got to work for everybody, and TV is niche. And I sort of realized this recently, and I went, wow, because who can be sure that you're in the thing that is Manchester by the Sea? You don't know. You know what I mean? Because there's a myriad of other really noble, beautiful films that just don't get heard because there's so much noise out there. But in television, there's really room for drama, and I'm in. You know, I'm like, yeah, I'll go off and do those, other movies that satiate all those things. But if you want to go and do drama, it seems like an amazing format to attempting to put somebody else's shoes on and live in them it can be personally a really amazing experience. As far as what it does for the world, I think that you can obliquely be part of changing culture. You know, I think films and acting and theatre can be that, and you know, I think that whenever anybody asks a similar sort of question, there are certain times, for instance, 1917 in Russia, where people would line up around the block, around to go and see a Chekhov play by the Moscow Arts Theatre Company. You know what I'm saying? That you feel that you are somehow part of sustenance at very specific times. I am surprised by the lack of response culturally, I think, in our industry to what we're seeing with Trump, for instance. But we're only 5 minutes into that, so who knows what next year brings. But I am surprised when listening to. I'm not hearing it in music, and I'm not hearing it. I'm not seeing it in as a response from us. Say again.
We're still in shock.
Yeah, I think we're all in shock, but I think it's time to sort of organize and get over it and really do something about it. I mean, we live in an interesting time, right? So the truth is there's something interesting, I think, to be said about truth right now, because the truth is very slippery. Whereas you run a media company and you can't be a sexual predator. You run the country, you can be a sexual predator. I mean, it seems very tenuous, and what's real for one person is not real. It's hard to nail down. I think there's something interesting to say about that, and wonder why we're not.
I think just the last question that people often like to end on is just, what is the best advice you've gotten in your career that you can now pass on to everyone in the room?
Well,
Question.
Well, bearing in mind the climate right now, it seems like a really inappropriate one, but the great advice that I hate giving actors advice, because I think it's so different now. You used to be able to get into a room and charm the director and the producers before you even got to reading something, and then, you'd made them think, it'd be nice to spend 3 weeks, 4 weeks with this guy or whatever, and now you got to do this thing called self-taping or something awful that is just feels like the most unconnected way to have a discussion about a project ever. Say again?
Just agreeing.
Yeah, it's just the worst. I mean, and why as a director you would want? I mean, I've directed one film, and I would not. I could not have done it over a TV. Oh, look at this person. Oh, look at this person. Oh, yeah, look at that. And you're not able to ask any questions. You're not able to be engaged in who that person is. I don't understand it. So that, the idea of being an actor now and auditioning is just like, when somebody says, I'm thinking of becoming an actor, what do I do? I don't know. I don't get really lucky. But the greatest advice that was ever given to me was on a film set, and now it feels a bit inappropriate, but I was told always to use the ladies' honey wagon because they're much cleaner. and it's true, because the men are fucking pigs on set. It's unbelievable. You go in the men's, it's like it's reminiscent of some sort of horrifying disaster has happened, and there's tissue paper everywhere, and there's some sort of filmy water all over the entire floor, and you're like, oh my God, and then you go into you knock on the women's, and there's nobody in there, because there are not enough women on film sets. But my God, the toilets are clean. And I go, oh, this is like, it's like heaven. I could drop my food and I'd eat it off the floor. It's so clean in here. So yeah, advice is dangerous, but yeah.
That's pretty solid, though. I
Thank
think
you very
it's
much.
inspirational to end on.
But don't go in when there's a woman in there, right?
All right. Thank you, Paul, for being here. Thank you all for being here. It was great questions, great conversation. Manhunt Unabomber streaming on Netflix if you want to watch the rest of it.